Hey there, folks. It's me, Chris, with the Gig Man's Life. Yeah, baby, it's a Gig Man's Life indeed. And this is one of those times where I'm going to go and say this right up front. Thanks to Rideshare Pro for covering this. I watched the channel, I'm subscribed. When you working rideshare, delivery, transportation, whatever name they want to slap on this pig for the week, you need to pay attention to what people are saying, what the lawsuits are saying, and what the regulations are starting to say. Especially when you are in the great state of Massachusetts, like I am, because Massachusetts is one of those states that loves regulations. The Bogots have nothing on Massachusetts except they could still outshine California. We have pay structures for rideshare. We have healthcare rules. We have labor laws. We have transportation rules. We have government systems layered on top of other government systems. Funky stuff. But this Uber shareholder lawsuit matters because it changes the conversation. This is not just drivers complaining, passengers whining, or the regulars saying, this isn't a lemonade stand within an app. Maybe you should stop pretending it is. This is the shareholders saying the board may have damaged the brand and weakened the business by failing to regulate itself. That is a very different kind of problem because the companies love to say, wait a minute, these are independent contractors. We're just the platform. We're just connecting people. Yeah, okay. But let's not play stupid. DoorDash, Grubhub, Instacart, Uber, Lyft, all of this is transportation. People, food, goods, packages, groceries. It moves from one place to another because somebody accepted a job through an app. That is transportation. And transportation has always ended up regulated when enough things go wrong. We're already having the model for this. Trucking has regulations, commercial passenger transport has regulations, livery has regulations, taxi has regulations, party buses have regulations. Once you get over a certain passenger count, certain vehicle types, certain commercial use cases, you need different licenses and different oversight. Why? Because when general public is being moved around or when strangers are entering your homes, businesses, buildings, hotels, campuses, and gated properties, the risk is not theoretical anymore. That is where this lawsuit gets interesting. Shareholders are not just saying, this looks bad. They're saying the board had warnings, the company had exposure, and the failure to address safety and compliance created a reputational and financial risk. That is board language level of buffoonery. And when you are dealing with thousands of pending claims, public safety complaints, court verdicts, and a brand that depends on people trusting strangers in a cars, that is not a little startup problem anymore. Uber's not a scrappy little app company trying to figure things out in a garage. Uber's a multi country international transportation company. At some point, we're just the platform. Stop sounding clever and start sounding like a liability strategy. Now, I'm not saying every accusation is automatically true. Not saying every driver is dangerous. Not saying every passenger's complaint is clean, accurate, or made in good or bad faith. I have done corporate security. I understand that human beings are messy, systems are imperfect, and no safety process stops everything. You can try to build a better mousetrap, and eventually you realize you're building better mice. But that doesn't mean you stop building the trap. Background checks matter, identity verification matters, training matters, safety policy matters, reporting systems matters, cameras matter, fingerprinting may matter in some jurisdictions, and if you can't honestly vet someone, you should be very careful about putting that person into a position where they are alone with public in cars, homes, hotels, dorms, hospitals, or private residences. That is not cruelty. That is risk management. And the companies know the difference. They know there is a gap between we can run this cheapest scalable check we can run through the app. And we built a transportation safety system worthy of public trust. They also know training is weak. A lot of training in industry is basically here's a page in the app, here's the policy update, here's a quiz. Click the box, keep moving. Did you read it? Click. Did you understand it? Click. Did the policy change? Click. Did anyone actually train you on what to do when the customer's drunk, naked, unconscious, aggressive, disabled, confused, stranded, underage, injured, or making accusations? Usually, no. And that's when something goes sideways. The company wants to say, well, that was the contractor. No, that is not good enough anymore, even as a driver, because every hit to the company's name means less customers to me. Because the driver, the dasher, the courier, the shopper, we are all the ones doing the service. We are the face of the transaction. The customer does not experience the boardroom. The customer does not experience arbitration clause. The customer does not experience the classification argument. They experience the person who shows up. That means the company cannot keep taking the benefit of the brand relationship while trying to dodge the responsibility of the service relationship. That is where the apparent agency issue becomes important. If the customer reasonably believes the person is acting through Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, or another app, then the company may not be able to hide forever behind independent contractor language. And that should worry shareholders, because shareholders are looking at this and saying, wait, just a minute. Are you protecting the long term value of the company, or are you protecting the short term structure that keeps labor costs and compliance costs low? Those are not always the same thing. We saw something similar in trucking over time. The industry had drivers running too long, pushing too hard, taking risk, and eventually people died. Families lost people. Drivers did not come home. Regulations followed. Hours of service ruled. Drug testing followed. Commercial safety rules followed. The government didn't wake up one morning and say, let's annoy truck drivers. The government reacted after the risk became impossible to ignore. Rideshare and delivery companies should understand that lesson before it gets imposed on them. Because if they do not regulate themselves, somebody else will. And when the government writes the rules after years of incidences, lawsuits, public pressure, and media coverage, the rules are usually heavier than what the companies could have ever built voluntarily. That is the part they keep missing. Safety is not just a moral issue, it's a business survival issue. If riders do not trust the platform, the brand takes damage. If the drivers don't trust the platform, retention takes damage. If regulators do not trust the platform, operation takes damage. If shareholders don't trust the board, governance takes damage. And now shareholders are suing. This is no longer just drivers complaining on YouTube. This is corporate governance. This is fiduciary duty. This is brand risk. This is legal exposure. This is the bill coming due for pretending transportation is not transportation because there's an app in the middle. And that brings me back to independent contractor argument. I understand why companies want it. I understand why many drivers like myself like the flexibility. I understand why some of us do not want to be employees. I do not want a dispatcher treating me like I'm sitting in a taxi garage in the 1980s. And since my dad had one, I know how it is for cab companies. But flexibility does not mean zero standards. Independent contracting doesn't mean invisible. App based does not mean unregulated. And transportation does not stop being transportation because the meter is now on the phone. This is where the industry needs to grow up. Not every driver needs to be treated like a criminal. Not every passenger needs to be treated like a liar. But the system needs to admit that strangers being connected through an app creates predictable risks. Predictable risks require predictable controls, proper background checks, better identity verification, real training, clear incident response, useful passenger and driver reporting, consequences for false claims, real misconduct, and a safe system that is more than button buried in the app. Because when only real training is click here to continue, do not be shocked when the real world produces problems the app never prepared anybody for. And this applies beyond Uber. DoorDash has its own mess. Delivery drivers entering private property, customers behaving badly, drivers behaving badly, videos posted online, privacy issues, safety issues, intoxicated customers or drivers, unclear instructions, no real training, and platforms acting like deactivation is a complete safety system. It isn't. Deactivation is not training. It is not prevention. It is not what happens after the system already decided, well, it's on them. And yes, people are going to say, well, cannot stop everything. Well, you're correct. You cannot. I've learned that. But you can reduce risk. You can document training. You can verify identity. You can respond properly. You can stop pretending that a national transportation network is just a cute little app connecting neighbors. That era is far gone now. Companies are too big, the risks are too known, the lawsuits too many, public trust issues are very obvious. And now shareholders are saying it too. That is why this matters, because when drivers say it, they get called complainers. When riders say it, they get customer service calls. When regulators say it, they call it government overreach. But when shareholders say it, that is when the boardroom starts listening. And maybe that is what it finally takes, because the gig economy isn't disappearing. Rideshare does not need to disappear. Delivery does not need to disappear. Independent work definitely doesn't need to disappear. But the fantasy version, it does. The fantasy says nobody's responsible. It says not transportation. Training is a checkbox. Safety is somebody else's problem. And that fantasy road is running out. And when we finally hit the wall, drive over the cliff, the question will not be whether the companies were warned. They were. The question will be whether they listened before someone else wrote the rules for them, because usually when the government gets in, be lucky you can even change the font on anything. And of course, folks, yes, I know, I gotta get on the hustle, make my money, pay my bills. I hope you have a fun, safe, and productive day, because if it ain't fun, it ain't safe, it ain't gonna be productive. Juice.